drivers. What do you see?
I think Chair Hersman captured it pretty well in terms of our understanding that, frankly, we don't know what an older driver is. Usually an older driver is anyone who's 15 years older than you are. But to your point, driving in America is not about getting from point A to point B. That really is not what it is. Driving fundamentally is about the glue that holds big and little things that we call life together. In fact, when you talk to drivers of any age, from 16 to 60, driving is about independence and freedom.
Walk us through the numbers then. What is the safety record here? Because I'm reading all kinds of things. Some things that say, well, first of all, the big observation, it's not age, it's health. That is put out again and again. But then you can look at statistics overall. Whereas the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration says by age 85, the crash rates are 9 times as high as those for drivers 25 to 69. That doesn't sound so great. So is there a kind of an age breakpoint overall that should have our attention focused on safety on the roads?
Disease, unfortunately, does not choose based upon birthdays, and birthdays do not kill, health conditions do. So as we look at those numbers, whether they're 85 or any other age, what we have to look at is what's the correlation with other things going on. Chair Hersman made a very good point that the sleeping giant out there is dementia and Alzheimer's-related activities. So what this really means is that the screening tools that we need are not just those things that are going to be at the registry or the DMV, but attentive families, friends, people who sit in the seat next to you, physicians.
How good is that screen now?
The screen that we have out there formally today is a product of sloppy policymaking and unclear research. The best screen is the person sitting next to you and a family member who sees you driving on a regular basis.
But that doesn't sound like a very confident description of our screen now to keep people who shouldn't be driving off the roads.
But that does not have any age bias to it, because we also know that throughout our lifespan, as well as younger people, we have a safety problem regardless. So it's really watching who is driving and how well they're driving. Now, if you look at the younger population, the 16 to 25, that's demonstrated evidence that octane, testosterone, and alcohol don't mix.
Recklessness of youth.
Recklessness of youth. But the fact of the matter is that as the population is aging, that's less an issue, that the population is less healthy than it used to be. Even the middle-aged folks with diabetes and allergies and the like, we now, I think, have to start thinking about safety through a lifespan and looking at health across the lifespan for driving.
I mean, I'm seeing some measures here saying older drivers can actually be better. They've got many years of experience. They know what to anticipate. They don't drive it when the weather's lousy.
Without question, older drivers are the best drivers on the road, I would submit, because they have the judgment, they have the experience, and unlike the middle-aged folks who don't have the choice, they know when they say, you know something, I can't make the trip because I'm not comfortable, nor maybe am I necessarily confident.
But they may not know when to give it up, and they have those skills, of course, until they don't. I mean, we all decline.
But that's where the family member and the friends and physicians need to come together with proper screening tools that have yet to be developed to identify a driver at any age as to what is appropriate time to give up the keys.
We're going to talk about that question and how to approach it. We'll ask you as well about technology at some point in this hour, whether it may save us, whether we'll have cars that drive themselves at some point. We've heard Eric Schmidt at Google talk about that not so long ago. Joseph Coughlin from MIT's Age Lab, please stand by. We're talking about driving and older Americans this hour. Older drivers, what's your experience on balance? Are you as safe as ever on the road or not? Do you dread the day when someone takes the keys away? 800-423-TALK. This is On Point.
Support for On Point comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston, where the program is produced. Liberty Mutual, offering auto, home, life, and business insurance for a variety of needs. Liberty Mutual Insurance. Responsibility. What's your policy? And Stonehill College, a small private college near Boston, offering programs in the liberal arts, sciences, business, and pre-professional fields. Located in Easton, Massachusetts. Stonehill.edu. 19 minutes past the hour now on WLRN and WKWM. Good evening. We're funded by listeners like you and by Kaiser University. For more than 30 years, Kaiser has been committed to helping students succeed. Kaiser University now offers fully online master's and doctoral degree programs designed for working adults. More information at kugradschool.com.
Last year, Broward Health performed over 1,300 joint replacements. Using state-of-the-art techniques, they offer a full range of orthopedic services, from minimally invasive arthroscopic procedures to full joint replacements. If you are having problems with your knees, hips, shoulders, ankles, or any other joint, Broward Health may be able to help. More information on the procedures is offered on their website, browardhealth.org, or at 800-528-4888.
Tom Ashbrook. This is On Point. We're talking this hour about driving and older Americans. The percentage of older drivers on the road is about to surge. What does that mean for safety? How do we deal with it? We're 1-800-423-8255. Lots of questions here. Older drivers, what is your experience? And do you dread the day when the keys are taken away or you give them up? Younger drivers, what's your experience with seniors on the road? Are they too slow? Are you too impatient? And what will it mean for road safety when 1 in 5, 1 in 4 drivers, maybe more where you live, is elderly? 800-423-TALK is our number. We've been joined by Joseph Coughlin. He's director of the MIT Age Lab. He's spent a lot of time looking at this. We'll hear voices from around the country in this hour. We're joined right now from Canton, Massachusetts, by Massachusetts State Senator Brian Joyce, serving his 7th term. He's been pushing for safe driving measures for elderly drivers. Brian Joyce, thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
There's a patchwork, as we just heard from the chair of the NTSB, a patchwork right across this country. We had some tough incidents in this neck of the woods not so long ago. You were pushing for a road test every 5 years as a condition for license renewal for drivers over 85. Did that get passed?
Well, a watered-down version got passed, and it's funny, when I made the proposal, I never anticipated that it would create the storm of opposition that it did create, and I guess I hadn't thought it through because, folks really are concerned about losing their independence, and we in the political arena are concerned about offending elderly drivers, but the reality is society is facing, as you point out, an aging population, and for the first time, an aging driving population, and it raises a whole host of issues in safety for the seniors and for the rest of us on the road.
So what about road testing? What's the pushback against that? Road testing for drivers over 85. What did you run into for opposition there?
Well, the current law in this state is that a person takes a driver's license examination at 16 and a half and then never again for the rest of their lives. Every other time, the renewals of 5 years, so every other time, every 10th year, a person would have to pass a vision test where they'd simply have to discern the difference between red. There's no testing of any cognitive skills or any physical skills, and I just thought that was crazy. So a person who was, say 95 years old and could tell the difference between red, green, and yellow was good to go essentially until that person was 105. And then, again, until they were 115. I mean, truly preposterous. I chose 85 as an age where we'd begin some testing for renewals beyond that age because the statistics were irrefutable that beyond age 85, where the Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that almost half of all Americans have some form of Alzheimer's, for example, in addition to cognitive disabilities, there's physical disabilities as a person ages. The studies, and particularly one from Carnegie Mellon, suggested that a person beyond 85 was almost 4 times as likely to be in a fatal accident as a teenager. And yet we've, in many states now, addressed the teenage drivers through forms of graduated licensing restrictions on these teenagers, and we're happy to do that because, frankly, in addition to saving lives, these teenagers don't vote, and we've seen, there was a report came out just last week, nationally, teenage driving deaths have been reduced by a third. Here in Massachusetts, they're down 75% since we've implemented this restrictive licensing. So
Brian Joyce, seniors do vote, as you know. I mean, do you think nationally we're going to deal with this thing in a clear-headed way, or are legislators like you, I don't know, they have trepidation about putting constraints in?
Well, it took 3 or 4 years, but eventually we did get a bill passed, and now when a person beyond 75 renews their license, they need to go in person rather than via the mail. Now, that seems like a small step. It is an important step.
What about the idea that people at any age can be impaired? Health problems, can hit people at any age. So if you're going to do it for seniors, why don't you do it for everyone?
Well, and that's the argument we hear it often in, in an ideal world, I suppose, would all be tested every single day. But we need to make some decisions and cost-benefit analysis and the like. And the statistics are irrefutable that, in common sense, would also tell us as we age, some of our physical and cognitive skills and our ability to drive, frankly, diminishes. Now, the overwhelming majority of persons on the road are safe drivers, including seniors, and many know enough to self-police to take themselves off the road and the like. But frankly, there are increasing examples of persons who did not know enough to stop driving, did not recognize that their skills had diminished such that they were no longer safe, and we have, almost on a daily basis in the United States, fatal accidents that perhaps could have been avoided.
Brian Joyce, Massachusetts State Senator, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, my pleasure.
Great to have you with us. Joseph Coughlin is with me in the studio. We're looking at this issue of older Americans and driving, and we have got, Joe, all kinds of response here online. It's really interesting stuff, Here's Steve in Vermont says, I'm much more concerned with drivers distracted with cell phones, drivers who are drinking than I am with the elders driving. On the other hand, here's Beverly in Iowa says, I know a lady who very recently lost her sight legally. She's legally blind. As much as I've tried to dissuade her, she continues to drive. That doesn't sound good. Here's Richard in Warren, Connecticut says, a few years ago, a man in his 70s was driving in his neighborhood, driving his pickup truck, approaching the center of his small town. He was driving the speed limit, but an impatient 24-year-old behind him, didn't want to go the speed limit, zoomed around. There were fatalities there. Sometimes it works out great. Here's Megan says, my 93-year-old grandmother had her license revoked after several minor accidents. She wasn't a good driver for the last 25 years, but being able to drive gave her the independence to keep her life meaningful in those later years. So we've got it right across.
I think it's one of the things that we pick up on is if you were not a good driver when you're younger, you're not going to improve when you're older. And I think one of the things that we really need to think about, listening to the senator there, is that across the country we have a policy failure to think in a systematic fashion. We do not have the testing. We do not know what's old. But more importantly, we don't have an alternative at the other end. Most older adults over age 50 do not live where transit alternatives exist. So until we can come up with a mobility approach, we don't have a system at all.
You've called it house arrest once those keys.
Essentially, yeah, you can have your health and you can have your money, but you'll also be staying in your house for a very long time.
Or, as we had a Canadian testifying last week at this NTSB hearing, this was Bonnie Dobbs, University of Alberta, says, the younger members of the family see that their elders are still going to need to get around, and it's going to be on them. She said they see this crushing wave of responsibility coming at them. When mom or dad give up the keys, you're going to be the chauffeur or guilty.
There's a little secret going on that most people don't like to say, which is people have a vested interest in all of us remaining mobile. So whether it's a spouse who depends on a husband to drive or whether it's an adult child, we're all vested in the mobility of each other.
Here's one more great web comment. My great-grandmother, John writes, drove her car to the grocery store, the hairdresser, to church, not to mention the liquor store now and again. She lived to be 106 and came to my father with her keys one day when she was 99. Fortunately for our family and the community, she was responsible and savvy enough to know when it was time.
And I think that's a piece that we tend to forget. The work that we've done with the Hartford in particular shows that the vast majority of older adults do know when to stop and will have that conversation in a positive way.
Let's go to Tucson, Arizona, and Sandra Rosenblum. She's professor of planning and gerontology at the University of Arizona, expert on the social impacts of aging populations and their travel, their mobility needs. She was also a panelist at the NTSB forum last week. Sandra Rosenblum, thanks very much for being with us.
Hi, Tom.
Do you think we're on top of this problem nationally?
No, of course not. Joe is right. We have a failure at all levels. We have a failure to develop techniques that allow us to know when someone has cognitive problems serious enough to stop them from driving. We're not on top of the mobility options. In fact, we sort of delude ourselves that there's some kind of systems waiting for people. Quite often, brochures and information to older people say, well, just give up the keys and your community is just full of transportation options. And that's a lie. It's just another scam against the elderly. There's not enough capacity in any of the existing options to provide mobility for most older drivers. Joe's right. Families are very worried, and it is a little secret. You
And at the last seconds or fraction of a second, he pulled the car over to the left shoulder, which would be the same place that oncoming car would go if that car was trying to avoid us. But the car didn't do that. The car stayed in the lane and went right between us and the Southern truck. And the next day, that evening, I talked to my SIPs, and or one of them anyway. And the next day, I called the county sheriff because at that point that was the local police, and made a report. And I was told that what they would do is that they would make him retake the exam.
In other words, you turned your own father in as a menace to society.
I did.
That must have felt terrible.
Yeah, well, before this, we had reports of him making some other left turns with my mom, and you know, where an oncoming vehicle, but I didn't see this directly, anything like this myself.
So what would have helped you here, Robert, you and your dad there in North Dakota?
Well, what would have helped would have been a little bit of different law, but let me tell you, there's more to the story.
Okay.
What they did is they basically trash canned his driver's license instead. Basically told him, your license is suspended, put it in an envelope and mail it back in.
They didn't give him a chance to retest or anything?
No. Well, they said that you could retest, but the default was your license is hosed. And,
okay.
And it took him 3 weeks to do that. So it's kind of a weird kind of a thing of hurry up and wait, because it was such an emergency to do that.
Right.
I think that they would have acted earlier.
So what happened?
Well, then he called me, and we had an argument over the phone. I was back in Vermont, and there was this real pain in his voice, and he told me that I betrayed him, and he was completely right. And it was really hard, and I hung up on him, and I was trying to argue with him. Yeah. And then he talked to my mom and asked her for a nitro tablet, and then he collapsed and died. It was probably a heart attack. So, but the thing is if I had done something, and then the worst thing would have been, what Steve didn't do to a judgment failure could have caused an accident that killed somebody, let's say a young mother and her baby or something, then I would have felt a real feeling of guilt.
Yes. I appreciate that. So much on the table all of the time. Senator Rosenblum in Tucson would let me bring it to you. Robert says he wished it had been better testing.
It's also it's more informal, and in one sense you say that it's great, you should really know the people that you can miles away from, or know that someone really can continue to drive. But in fact, it creates this kind of quagmire where you never know if somebody is going to be taken off the road. So as previous speakers have said, there's no system, there's no uniform way of doing it. You don't follow the county sheriff or you follow the license bureau. In most cases, you don't
Execution, a consulting firm addressing the strategic needs of large and emerging life science and healthcare companies. ScientiaAdvisors.com. Actors Playhouse presents the three-time Tony Award-winning musical Oliver at the Miracle Theater in Coral Gables. One of the most beloved musicals of all time, Oliver brings to life Charles Dickens' timeless characters with its ever-popular story of the boy who asked for more. A holiday treat for the whole family, Oliver plays Wednesday through Saturday at 8 p.m. with afternoon matinees on Saturday and Sunday at 2 p.m. November 17th through December 26th. Tickets at 305-444-9293 or at actorsplayhouse.org.
SouthFloridaTheater.com and 91.3 WLRN offers same-day half-price tickets at leading regional theaters and cultural organizations, including Actors Playhouse, Caldwell Theater, Able Stage, and Mosaic Theater. Information on a complete list of shows online at culturalconnection.org. Culturalconnection.org, your ticket to the cultural arts.
Join me for Thursday's topic occurrence when we observe National Adoption Month. 2010 has been a record-breaking year for adoptions in South Florida. In a 90-day, the Family Resource Center accelerates cases to reduce the time children spend in foster care. And more, Linda Gastenheimer visit with the creator of the huge food network at South Beach Wine and Food Festival. So listen in Thursday. Jeffrey in Stowe, Vermont. Jeffrey, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Yes.
I think some of the points I want to make have been touched upon, but I would like to sort of highlight my own personal experience. I'm 69, I'm going to be 70 next March.
It's the new 40, we're told.
Pardon?
It's the new 40, we're told.
Yes, the new 40. Well, I wish my back was
Yeah, agree.
I have done a tremendous amount of driving in my lifetime, and being born in England, and I took my driving test, and my father said, now you're going to really learn to drive, and he refused to let me take a car out until I've been driving with him for a year.
Wow. So you really got schooled.
Pardon?
You really got schooled.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Subsequently, in my professional career, I had to do an awful lot of traveling. First of all, driving all around Europe, because I was in marketing, and then subsequently moving to the States in my job. I continued my responsibility doing an awful lot of road travel.
So at 69 going on 70, what do you see out there now, Jim?
Well, what I see is the following. The worst accidents that I have had, and I admit to having had them, were within 10 years of my getting my driving license. In my 90 years, I have had hardly any accidents of any import. I think the last accident I had was when a deer jumped out in front of the car on my way back to Stowe.
So how should we handle this?
Well, my opinion is that the emphasis is on intellectual ability. I don't see any point in having a road test as a way of assessing an older person's ability to drive. I think
I respect intellectual
do the same thing we do, and that some states do, that if in fact someone is seen to be behaving badly, whether they're 16 or 60 or 105, they can be reported to authorities, and those folks are brought in. There's a number of studies that show that it's a very small percentage of older drivers that are bad drivers, and until we get better ways to test people, and we have really bad ways to test people, these tests are just expensive and often are a waste of time. Let me point something else out. One of the things that happens particularly with women when there has to be retested is they never go and get retested. They just give up driving. And we have substantial evidence that a lot of women, older women who give up driving, give it up before they should. They're still able, capable drivers, or they have small problems which could be addressed. An occupational therapist, for example, could help them be a better driver, and yet they just give up because they're afraid of the tests. So we have to develop a much better way before we, I really have to disagree with the state senator. It doesn't make sense to say any age is the age at which you should be tested until we can develop ways that are really effective at telling whether somebody is a good driver or not. You're taking a lot away from a person, and we really need to be developing better tests. We need to be developing better options. One of the things that predicts whether somebody's going to give up driving or not is marital status and household structure. In other words, if you have an older driver in the house, you're more likely to give up driving. But in women's cases, sometimes they're the better driver, yet they give up driving and continue to rely on the older male driver who may not be so good and maybe should not be.
This trucker guy won't give it up, and if you're couple, we don't want to just sit on our hands here for everyone's sake.
Let me share with your listeners a guide that we developed with the Hartford and U.S. Department of Transportation, the Hartford Insurance Company. Essentially, it begins with a diagnosis. If you've been diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when you will be giving up driving. But also getting in the seat next to the driver. What is that pattern? Is it just one mailbox or one bumper, or do we see a pattern of scrapes and bumps and things that show that driving is no longer possible?
Who's going to report that?
Well,
here's systematically ensure that we get that in.
That is the challenge. The challenge is that you've got to be with the older driver. Go for a ride with him. Not just call up from a half a country away and say, congratulations, Dad, happy birthday, it's time to give up driving. So once you do that, we have found in our research that overwhelmingly, older adults want to hear from someone who cares about them.
Are you sure about that?
Absolutely.
Are we going to say, our data are overwhelming?
Yes, it was that thing. It might not always got our mere voices.
Once they see that, having a conversation will be a plan and a show which they care about how they're going to get around the hours.
Well, let's go to Charlene in Winchester, Virginia. Charlene, you're on the air.
Hi. I've been sitting here listening to your phone call, and I just wanted to say that we all get our license at about the same time of age.
Yes.
17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
We get our training at about that time, and we're left free to do what we want all our lives. That's about all we get. I'm a commercial driver, so I have to get trained throughout the year.
Right.
I have to get random drug testing throughout the year. It's not so much the elderly having problems driving. It's all ages. It's alcohol, it's drugs, it's complacency, lack of training and safety. You get it and that's it. And then you get complacent in what you're doing and you get bad habits, and I think everybody should have to be treated like a commercial driver.
Some good
drug testing, and if you come up dirty, get your license suspended, pay the fine.
So up the standard right across the board, Charlene, and you see that as somebody who drives commercially. I appreciate that. Let's get one more here. Thank you, Charlene. Lincoln, Nebraska, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi, what do you know, Luke?
2 points. Well, 2 points to touch on. I'll try to be brief. I don't really succeed at that, but I'll try to be brief. First of all, a lot of people have touched on this. Drivers across the board just make terrible mistakes. You have all kinds of anecdotal reports coming in from your Facebook that say, my grandma lived to be, 170 places and she was fine until the day she died. And you have reports saying 24-year-olds run into me and they ruin my bumper. So basically, people should be tested.
There is that toll by plate shit. Toll by plate. Never heard of that.
Versus other drivers in terms of safe driving.
Phone ringing.
kidding. It's a good point, Luke. I mean, it's interesting. These professional drivers calling in saying they want to see everybody tested more. Nashville, Tennessee. Yvonne, you're on the air.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. What's your story, Yvonne?
My story is my husband, who is an only child, had noticed that his mother had seemingly lost some of her cognitive skills, and also she had a couple of small accidents. And so he tries to take her keys away from her by explaining, and doing it in the very best way that he could. But she could see that she was going to be losing her independence, getting to the grocery store, getting to get her hair done, going to church. And so anyway, she started to cry. So my husband comes home and relates the story to me, and I said, well, I can understand how she feels. So we're going on a trip over Memorial Day. So when we get back, which was just a few days away, when we get back, we will move her in with us, and we'll take her to all those places that she needs to go.
Right.
I can see she really needs to do that. So while we were away, she was in a horrible accident that she caused, and she was killed on Memorial Day. It's been about 5 years ago. So sometimes even when a loved one showing care and just doing it for the best, maybe we need to be a little tougher.
Be tougher, because you see what can happen if we're not. On the other hand, there's that independence urge out there always. Yvonne, I appreciate that call. One more, then we'll take it to our pros here. Scott in Wakefield, Massachusetts. Scott, you're on the air.
Hi, I think it's worth mentioning that you may have difficulty dealing with the entrenched bureaucracy with these matters. My father, who was a consummate driver in his prime, in his 80s and sinking into dementia, became an extremely hazardous driver. I called the New Hampshire registry asking them if they might want to screen him. Rather than do that, they called him up and told him that his son was trying to have his license taken away. And the only good point here was that he was so far into dementia he didn't remember for a very long period of time afterwards.
So you didn't really, it wasn't a helpful path that showed up when you tried to take action, and we heard that today. I'm Tom Ashbrook. This is On Point. Let me get one more, and I'll take it to our guests here. Ellen, Des Moines, Iowa. Ellen, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. My comment today is based on the consequences of these elderly drivers when they get in an accident. I work for a trauma center here in Des Moines, and when we hear that we have an older patient coming in results of a motor vehicle accident, I'm always dismayed because their recovery times are just terrible. And the consequences for them are much worse with the injuries than a younger driver would be. And I hope that this would be something that would, help people start that conversation with their parents about driving past their capacity, because they don't realize how devastating it can be to their lives.
You see the physical damage once
a younger patient.
Once they hit the trauma center, they can be in real trouble. Ellen, I appreciate that call as well. Sandra Rosenblum, and here we are. We know it's not easy. What are you recommending that we do?
Following up on our previous, the woman who worked in the trauma center, one of the things that's happened in this country is pedestrian crash rates have dropped substantially because older people are riding in cars where it's actually safer. So one of the things we're telling older people is get out of the car and walk where they're far more likely to have very serious falls and crashes. So one of the things we have to do is address all the modes. We can't just tell people get out of your car, because there's not enough resources in most communities to take care of that. So the most important thing is keeping older people driving safely longer. We have to develop all sorts of ways to do that. Then, when we put people on other kinds of transportation alternatives, we have to help them. We have to be willing to spend money. If you're worried about the costs of hospitalizing older people, let's try to take some of that money and spend it on creating community options, supporting volunteer systems, spending more money on public transit so that it provides not just for commuter trips, but for the kinds of trips that older people can take. We have to talk about making pedestrian facilities safer. I talk to a lot of older people, and they're terrified of walking, let alone driving. They're terrified of kids cycling and skateboarding on the sidewalks. And we have to take this systematically. Every single transportation option we have to consider how all of those interact with the the frailties and the skill levels, etc., of older people.
Joe Coughlin, here comes our future, doubling of the older drivers. What do you...
With baby boomers aging once every 7 seconds, turning 65, we have a failure of personal planning and public policy. We need to recognize changes in health and our driving patterns and have that conversation. We need to rethink community to make it livable so you can walk.
What do you mean, the actual design of community?
Actually, where we want to live, as much as the design of communities that have sidewalks and alternatives. Redesign the car, and then finally, we need to reinvent transit to go where we want to be, not where transit thinks it should go.
Redesign the car in what way?
Making it not only safer for a 5'10", 165-pound, 25-year-old design engineer, but for a 75-year-old small woman who sits on top of the wheel.
And if there is no magic wand that's going to produce all of these results, as boomers, rapidly, get into older years.
And when I just predict we have a personal tragedy coming with the baby boomers, where Sandy's own work has shown 70% of them are living in suburban and rural areas, that I see a personal tragedy that is going to turn into a political policy challenge that will make Social Security look like a trip to the park.
What's the tragedy?
The tragedy is the following. I will have done everything I was supposed to do in my young age. Went to school, went to work, raised a family. And now my success will be the icon of my home, living in rural and suburban America, where I have my retirement and I have my health. And I have a very comfortable chair because there's no way for me to get out.
You're just stuck in that
I'm
house.
stuck in. Because even if you have your health, that's not everything. You have to get there before you can do anything.
But if you're healthy, you can probably drive.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's one of the challenges we have around transit, is that if you're healthy enough to drive, the likelihood of you needing to take the bus is very low. If you're not healthy enough to drive, using current transit as it is looked at, as it is delivered today, is not really an alternative.
Actually, it's easier to drive than to use public transportation. That's the last thing older people give up, is driving, because they can't walk a fourth of a mile to a transit stop, even if there is a transit stop a fourth of a mile away, which is unlikely.
With the vast majority of Americans not using transit, no matter how the economy has changed, you don't wake up one day at 85 and say, I think I'll take the bus.
Not as simple as just slamming on the brakes on older drivers, and we hear that from many angles here today. I'm very grateful to you, our guests, for helping us wade into this. Sandra Rosenblum at the University of Arizona, joining us from Tucson. Sandy, thank you very much for being here today.
It was fun. Thanks.
Yeah, great to have you. And Joseph Coughlin, director of the MIT Age Lab. Thanks for your work, and thanks for your insights today.
Thanks for being here.
Listeners, thank you for joining us and your stories. Good luck in your family. Good luck with your driving. I'm Tom Ashbrook. This is On Point.
Somebody spent a lot of time decorating, didn't it?
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and NPR.
Support for On Point comes from WBUR Boston. Eton, offering the Microlink, an ultra-compact solar-powered radio with flashlight and cell phone charger for emergencies or travel. Available at Amazon.com. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, dedicated to the idea that all people deserve the chance to live a healthy, productive life. Details are at gatesfoundation.org. And the George Lucas Educational Foundation, creator of Edutopia, a source for what works in education. Learn more at edutopia.org. This is NPR.
This is 91.3 WLRN and HD1 Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and the Palm Beaches. 91.5 WKWM and HD1 Marathon, Key West. About a minute and a half now before 8 o'clock. The Area Stage Company at the Riviera Theater presents the Jerry Fisher Jazz Orchestra with Brenda Alford on Sunday, November 21st at 4 p.m. 1560 South Dixie Highway in Coral Gables. Tickets at 305-666-2078 or areastagecompany.com. Last year, Broward Health performed over 1,300 joint replacements. Using state-of-the-art techniques, they offer a full range of orthopedic services, from minimally invasive arthroscopic procedures to full joint replacements. If you are having problems with your knees, hips, shoulders, ankles, or any other joint, Broward Health may be able to help. More information on the procedures is offered on their website, browardhealth.org, or at 800-528-4888. City Year Miami unites a diverse group of 17 to 24-year-olds for a year of service as tutors, mentors, and role models who make a difference to students and schools. You can learn more online at cityyear.org. City Year. Give a year, change the world. Tonight's forecast for the Miami area calls for partly cloudy skies with lows in the upper 60s. Tomorrow, partly sunny with a 30% chance of showers. Right now, 76 degrees in Miami at 8 o'clock.
I'm Dick Gordon. Coming up, the story of one family's struggle to make sense of just what's going on in the tangle of foreclosures and loan modifications between bankers and borrowers. Michelle Graham knows that her family paid too much for their home in Vegas, and she knows how it happened.
I know they were throwing out loans left and right for people that can't afford hardly anything, and that's not just me, you know. They gave us a loan for a lot of money, but if we looked back and the loan officer looked at that, you know what, I guarantee he wouldn't have gave it to us.
Michelle's the first to admit that the financial trouble her family is in is their own fault. She's just trying to find a way out. She got Bank of America to agree to lower her monthly payment, and she's been trying for the past year to get that payment made permanent. But every time she talks to the bank, she says it's like starting all over again. And that means the threat of foreclosure never goes away. I'll talk with her after the news.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Spear. Man billed as the first Guantanamo Bay terror suspect to face a civilian trial, Ahmed Gailani has been found not guilty of terrorism charges today in a federal trial in New York. 36-year-old Gailani, native to Tanzania, was accused of conspiring with al-Qaeda to plan car bomb attacks on embassies in Kenya and Tanzania that killed 224 people. The jury did find Gailani guilty of one charge of conspiracy to damage or destroy U.S. property by means of an explosive device, where he was cleared of 276 murder and attempted murder counts, along with 5 conspiracy charges. The jury deliberated over 7 days. It appears incumbent Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski has won re-election in Alaska. As NPR's Martin Costa reports, Murkowski's victory defied the odds.
Murkowski lost the Republican primary to Tea Partier Joe Miller. So in September, she decided to run as a write-in candidate. Political experts called it a long shot. In the University of Minnesota's Smart Politics blog, Eric Ostermeyer wrote an article pointing out to all the prominent Alaska politicians who failed as write-in candidates. Now, Ostermeyer calls Murkowski's win staggering.
Actually, if you add up all the votes that have been cast for write-in candidacies in Alaska from 1958 until this election, she will probably exceed all of those other 8 candidacies combined.
Murkowski had some advantages. Not only was she an incumbent, but her father, Frank Murkowski, was also a senator and governor. Martin Costi, NPR News. Nancy Pelosi, who will be the top Democrat in the reconfigured House of Representatives, Pelosi, the first female House Speaker, will lose the job in January with a new Republican majority. However, she praised fellow Democrats, said the party, despite its diminished status, is not giving up on core issues.
I'm proud to be part of this leadership team. Our consensus is that we go out there listening to the American people. It's about jobs, about reducing the deficit, and it's about fighting for the middle class.
Republicans, for their part, announced today they've chosen John Boehner of Ohio to become Speaker in the new Congress. Over a dozen people were arrested in San Francisco in protest against tuition cuts at the University of California. George Richard Gonzalez reports.
13 people were arrested, including one who allegedly assaulted a police officer by striking him with his own baton. Police used pepper spray to break up what they called an unruly and aggressive crowd. Over 300 people demonstrated against a planned 8% hike in student fees, this coming on a 32% increase last year. The UC Board of Regents is scheduled to vote on the proposed tuition hike on Thursday. Richard Gonzalez, NPR News, San Francisco.
After recent market volatility sparked by investor concerns about the burgeoning debt crisis in Europe, stocks ended little change today. Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 15 points. The Nasdaq gained 6 points. You're listening to NPR. A senior military official is now recommending that Army Major Nidal Hasan stand trial in connection with last year's deadly shootings at Fort Hood. According to Hasan's lawyer, the recommendation was issued by Colonel James Poe, reported to be recommending Hasan be court-martialed on 13 counts of premeditated murder and 13 counts of attempted murder in connection with the shootings last November at the Texas Army Post. Final decision on whether to try Hasan rests with the commanding general. Federal regulators have given coal mine owner Massey Energy a few more days to avoid a federal seizure of the Upper Big Branch mine in West Virginia. As NPR's Howard Burgess reports, that's the mine where 29 mine workers died in the massive explosion in April.
The possible eviction of all Massey Energy officials from the mine is based on a standoff between the company and state and federal investigators. The investigators want to test water sprayers on the Longwall mining machine, considered a possible source of the explosion. The sprayers help control sparks and explosive coal dust, and some are believed to be clogged, broken, or missing. Massey has refused to feed water to the sprayers so they can be tested. The company says running the sprayers will compromise evidence it is assessing in its own investigation of the blast. Federal regulators cited Massey for impeding the official state and federal investigation and initially gave the company until noon Wednesday to comply. But federal mine safety officials extended the deadline to Friday. Howard Burkus, NPR News.
The Transportation Security Administration is acknowledging new pat-down procedures airline passengers are being asked to undergo are more intrusive than he thought. TSA head John Bissell telling members of the Senate panel he can understand why travelers are raising concerns. Bissell told lawmakers the agency does not intend to change the policies. I'm Jack Spear, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from Fox Searchlight Pictures, presenting 127 Hours, starring James Franco, and based on the true story of Aaron Ralston, now in select theaters.
Michelle Graham is one of the homeowners who got caught. She and her husband bought a home in Vegas near the peak of the market. Then he lost his job, prices came crashing down, and they owe more money than the home's actually worth. Michelle got one of those loan modifications where the bank has agreed to lower the monthly payments, but for the past year now, the adjustment has been temporary. Michelle knows they could still lose their home to foreclosure.
You know, I'm afraid I'm paying these payments for nothing, because they're going to take my house anyway. And so part of me is like, the bank needs to just give us an answer, do something, or I'm moving on. You can have my house, and I'm going to have to live with that.
Michelle is among the many who are, at this moment, caught and waiting for the banks to sort out their paperwork. I'm Dick Gordon. This is The Story.
The Story is produced by North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. It's co-produced by American Public Media. The Story is supported by Fox Searchlight Pictures, presenting 127 Hours, based on the true story of Aaron Ralston, from the director of Slumdog Millionaire, Danny Boyle, and starring James Franco, now playing in select theaters.
Coming up later in the program, a young man discovers his passion for the ancient art of the blacksmith. First though, the underwater mortgage and a long, long wait for a word from the bank. The woman who is the president of Bank of America's Home Loan Division appeared at the Senate Banking Committee yesterday. Now, she didn't use the language of her boss. He's called this mess of foreclosures and loan modifications day-to-day, hand-to-hand combat. Barbara DeSoto says they are trying at the bank to get it fixed.
We've redesigned our loan modification process to offer a single point of contact to our customers, and we have more than 140,000 customers who are experiencing this today.
Michelle Graham is one of those customers. Her family's living in a house in Las Vegas. They paid over $500,000 for the home, and it's no longer worth anything like that. And so they went through the necessary paperwork to get their monthly payments reduced. And 1 year ago, Bank of America agreed.
A loan modification trial period plan. And wow, I was jumping up and down and saying, yeah, they finally see our situation. They're finally going to help us. Yes, I told the kids, yay, we're going to stay here. And
what was happening to the payments? Now, you had been in default on payments of what? $3,800, $4,000, is that right? That was the monthly payments that you were missing, am I right?
Yes.
And what did the bank say you had to pay now? How much had they lowered it to?
To $1,750.38. I'm sorry, it's $1,738.50, the opposite.
You hit me at $1,738.
Yeah.
But it was doable, that's the point, right?
Oh yeah, it was doable. I was so extremely excited. And called my husband up, and he's like, see, you went through this, you have all this hard time, it's going to be okay, I told you, and...
Right, but when it came, it was a trial period. It wasn't like a permanent loan modification, right?
Right, it was a 3-month, and it said in 3 months, if I pay my payment on time, then it's going to become permanent. And I was like, oh, praise God, we can pay this, and we'll get to move on with our life.
Michelle Graham says the next thing that came in the mail was a notice asking that the first payment in this new trial program be paid. So Michelle paid. The next thing she knew, Bank of America was asking for that first payment again. Michelle had a meeting with a woman at the bank.
She goes, oh, you already paid it. Oh, you already have it. This will be an easy case. Let me get on the phone. So she gets on the phone and does her thing with Bank of America, whoever she's talking to, and she gets off. She goes, yeah. She goes, you sure did make that payment, and you sure do have that 3-month trial period. Well, congratulations, and we shook hands, and so I had already made my payment for the first, right? Probably like 10 days later, the 10th or something, I got a call from Bank of America saying, you haven't made your payment. Because, see, I made my January's payment back, right when I got the letter. And that was, I'm going to say, the 1st of December.
Right, so January's payment was made early.
Way early. Yeah. So when I made my February's payment, they said, oh, well, this is for your January's payment. I said, no. So they're trying to tell me that, this is going to go for January. So then March came by, same thing. Oh, we had to apply up to February because you're late. What? I had to call a few times just to make sure and clear that the computer put it in right, at the right date and stuff. Because I didn't want to I wanted my permanent loan modification, and with the way it was looking like I was late. But it was early. So I was so frustrated. Oh, wow.
Michelle Graham spent a lot of time on the phone with Bank of America trying to keep this straight. These lower payments were allowing the family to stay in their Vegas home to avoid foreclosure. And the trial period of this loan modification continued. She made the same payments through the spring and summer, and then one day this past August, she went to the door and found a FedEx package. She was certain that this was the paperwork which would make her loan modification final.
Oh my goodness, yes. I was so excited. I was, yay, it's done. Just opened it up and it said, you're not qualified for the MHA modification. And you're not qualified for it. And so here's your new payment. And the new payment is $38.90.02.
$38.90.02.
Yes.
And you've been paying $1,700 and change for the past 8 months at this point, right?
Yes.
And so what's the real answer? What's the real pay? Do you believe what you got in the FedEx package, or do you believe the last thing that somebody told you, which is, don't worry, you're fine, everything will go through?
Oh my goodness, I didn't know what to think, because I know that not every office is communicating with each other. So I thought, I called the bank. And I asked him what my status was. Now, I didn't mention the paperwork. I just wanted to mention my status to see what was going on. And the fellow that answered the phone said, just pay your payment on time. And I said, my payment for $1738.50. He says, yes, if that's what you've been making, yes, that's what you're supposed to be paying.
It's been 3 months since that contradiction, and Michelle remains in limbo, still making the lower monthly payment. But she's afraid that at any moment the bank could ask for more or penalize her by foreclosing on the home. You're listening to the story. Michelle Graham says she isn't blaming anyone else for the situation she's in. If they keep their lower payments, they can probably stay in the house. If they can't and it slips into foreclosure, she says she is ready to accept that and move on. It's the not knowing that she finds so difficult. Michelle looks back with a lot of regret. She and her husband moved to Vegas 4 years ago, a time when home prices were at their peak.
It's crazy because we had a set amount on how much our homes, what we were looking for. And it seemed like little by little, our realtor would say, oh, you can afford this, or you can afford that. And it was like, me and my husband would get together and we're like, no, we can't. Let's not do that, And then,
where did you start out, Michelle? What was the figure that you started out with?
It was about $350. And, I wasn't interested because they were really run down, just old. I didn't want something like that. And then And so the next day she'd go, oh, but here's another house. And I'd be like,
this one's only 410. Let's take a look at this one, guys.
Yeah. Exactly. And even those, honestly, even those, you're going to have to redo the kitchen. You're going to have to do, you're going to have to put in your own backyard because there's no backyard. And that's not what we wanted. It was like, no, there has to be something out there that we can afford. So, oh, wow. It was just, she'd go back to the loan officer and she'd say, sit down with them. I know, he can offer you or give you a better, higher loan, amount. We just fell for it, man. We just were just excited about buying a house. Anyway, we find this house, and it was like, my realtor says, there's another couple of bid, another buyer. And so if you want it, you better make an offer, and you better, accept or whatever. So, and so I call my husband up, and I'm like, there's another offer. And
you really like this place, right?
I really did, yeah. I mean, I still do, yeah. And I really liked it. And it was, there's nobody looking in your backyard, in my backyard. It's one story. It's just really comfortable. And so, honey, we need to make an offer on this. We really need it. And he's always like, honey, there's always another house. This is kind of high for us. And I should listen to my husband more.
How much did you pay for this house, Michelle?
$575.
So you were way out of your range, or out of what you had expected to pay, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? That was the highest house we looked at. And I'm thinking, with that amount of money, and to only look at that house, hello, Michelle? I mean, you could have looked at, a whole bunch more homes.
You can hear your mother now, right? It's your own fault.
And that's, what, it is. And I'm telling you, we have learned so much through this situation and process that I won't ever put myself through this again.
Michelle Graham's story is even more complicated. When they left California, they kept the house they had there. They took out a second mortgage on that home to buy the place in Vegas. They thought they had it figured out. Rent the place in La Quinta and use the income from the new job in Vegas to cover the monthly payments on both homes. It was still an awful lot of money.
Roughly around $58.50.
And the money was there, right? Like Doug had that income, and you had every reasonable expectation that money would continue to come in to cover those costs.
Yes, but you know what? It seemed when I think back now, it seems like when I was getting the loan, they really weren't looking at my house in California. They were looking at I had money to put down on my house here, and what our income is. But I don't really seem to recall them. And I know that's my responsibility, but I think we just went over our head with the amount that we were getting ourselves into.
Michelle Graham and her husband Doug are among the many Americans who are right now trying to figure out what's next as politicians and bankers continue to send out contradictory messages about foreclosure, loan modification. Michelle did get help from her local legal aid office, and she also got her senator on the case, and the matter is still not resolved. We'll talk more with her in just a moment. Later in the program, I'll meet a young man who goes at his new passion, hammer and tongs, new blood in the blacksmith business. I'm Dick Gordon from American Public Media. This is The Story.
19 minutes past the hour on WLRN and WKWM. Good evening. Forecast for Palm Beach County calls for a 20% chance of showers, skies otherwise should be partly cloudy, lows should fall to the upper 60s. Tomorrow, partly sunny with a 30% chance of showers and high in the lower 80s. Right now, 77 degrees in Boca Raton.
Absolutely. And that's why we didn't make the payments.
When did you miss your first payment?
January.
January of 09, right? And was that hard for you?
Oh, very hard. I have never been late on anything. I will always pay my mortgage on time. I paid all everything I have, I paid on time. My credit was perfect. And it was hard because I felt like I was, I had just, what's the word for it? Like, I failed. You know, I failed, and here we are in a situation that we put ourselves in, and there was nothing I can do. You're so used to being able to pay your bills. You know, you get your electric bill. Here, pay it. You know, you get this, pay it. You know, and that just is a sense of security. It's security. You know, when you be able to pay your bills on time, man, that's just awesome. I love the feeling that I can actually pay my stuff. And when I wasn't be able to do it anymore, and slowly I wasn't, I had to call the creditors, and I had to call my electric bill and all this stuff to make payment arrangements or whatever, all that stuff I had to do. It was tough. And it was, my self-esteem was just like, oh man, this is just, I felt for the people that, were going through what I was going through. I felt, I've always looked at other people that didn't have much money, and I've always wanted to help them, and I had to help them. And I was at a time that I couldn't help anybody anymore. If somebody needed help, I wasn't there to help them anymore. And that was tough for me. Because I am such a giving person, and so anyway, yeah. I was in their shoes. I was in their situation, and
it happened so quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Michelle and Doug Graham have collected credit cards. They've been talking with the bankers ever since they got into financial trouble. You're listening to the story. Michelle says she's been getting very mixed messages. The bank agreed to lower her monthly payments to $1,738, and that was supposed to be temporary. The bank has since sent her paperwork saying the payment should be $3,900. She still remembers the day she found a default notice left at her gate.
And I had sheets of paper on my front security gate, and it was all taped up with this dark blue bright tape on my screen. Included were my deed of trust and my note, and default letter, and it was just like, oh my goodness, I was bombarded by it all the time.
Let me ask you something about those papers on the gate, though. I mean, when you saw them, Michelle, was it, okay, this is the beginning of the end, or, oh my God, now the neighbors all know because my house has had these notices up in the gate?
I was thinking, they had no right to put this on my door like this. They don't, yeah, you know what, I owe you money. And yes, I have a loan. It's not like I'm just hoarding all this money, and I literally, we don't have money. And here you are just putting paper up in my yard, and I'm trying, and I'm calling, and I'm trying to deal with this bank, but they won't do anything. But they do that kind of stuff.
So it's kind of like a public shaming to you, right?
Yeah. And it's nobody's business but mine and the banks, And at the time, I'm like, by putting that up, what are they trying to do for me? What are they trying to do to help the situation? Because that isn't helping the situation. It's just making it worse.
Michelle Graham and her husband are currently waiting for a final word from Bank of America to secure their mortgage modification. They've had a lot of help from a legal aid lawyer in Las Vegas, a man named Michael Joe. About 6 weeks ago, Michelle and Michael went to a meeting that had been organized by their senator, Harry Reid. That time, representatives from Bank of America were there in person.
Yes, there was probably, I'm going to say about 15 to 20 Bank of America reps there. The gal came up to me, the main lady for Senator Reid, came up to me, and she goes, oh, I'm really hope the best for you. And she said, there's been people walk away crying, and they won't do nothing. And then there's some people that walk away happy, because I don't know what to expect. I know. So here we go. We go up to a guy named Pete. And he looks at the computer, because they have all computers in front of them, and they had, it was a pretty cool setup for everybody, because it was like, oh, yay, let's
fix this.
And he looks at the computer and looks up our account, and we have all the paperwork in front of us, and he looks at it. He says, I don't understand why they didn't do this permanent loan modification in April when they're supposed to. And me and Michael were like, yes, that's why we're here, and he was genuinely, it sounded very genuine, and he, that he couldn't believe that it wasn't permanent yet. So he's like, he totally understood our situation, and he saw that this should be done immediately, and it was so and he actually gave his business card to Michael and said, call me direct. You don't have to call and talk to all kinds of different reps at via Bank of America anymore. Just deal with me. And I'm going to put this through. I'm going to go back to the office and work on this. Wow. I was like, okay, here's another pie. You know? Exactly. And that's how it really was. I mean, I wanted to hug everybody. And
so did that fix it?
No. It hasn't fixed it. I have called Pete 5 times.
And what does he say?
Left a message. Oh, he hasn't answered. It's his voice. You can hear his voice on the voicemail saying it's Bank of America. Thank you for calling. This is for Pete, and his last name, and please leave a message. So I leave a message, and I have not received a call from him. I don't understand.
Michelle Graham finally reconnected with Pete from Bank of America earlier this week. That came in the midst of another afternoon of contradictions. First, Michelle spoke with a woman from the bank who told her that their home was now officially in foreclosure. And then Michelle got through to Pete, who told her not to worry, that it should all work out with a lower payment. So Michelle says she'll keep paying. But she doesn't know what the bankers will do next. Will they penalize her for not paying more money? Could they still take her house?
My whole family's at a point now that the bank needs to just give us an answer, do something. We need to move on. And I'm afraid that, I'm going to be paying these payments to them because I have stories. I'm afraid that I'm paying these payments for nothing because they're going to take my house anyway. And so part of me is like, would you please do this permanent law modification and let me know today, or I'm moving on. You can have my house, and I'm going to have to live with that, and I'm going to have to just go on and try it, That's where I'm at right now. It's like, it's a home. It's a roof over my head, and I can find other places. But I would ultimately want to stay in my house. Absolutely. I'm just tired. I'm tired of being stressed out about it. I'm tired of thinking about it every day. It's just unfortunate that, they're just letting me just hang and just wonder every day.
Michelle Graham has a friend in Vegas in a similar situation. This friend waited for more than a year to get her loan modification made permanent, and when it finally happened, her payments were lowered. Some days Michelle doesn't know what to think, but she knows she's not alone.
I know it's happening to so many people, and that's what I want people to know, that they're not alone. I just have to hang in there. I just have to do whatever I can do. And every day, I try to just think of today and not go and think of the future. Because if I start thinking of different things of the future and all the money I owe, oh my. So I just put one foot in front of the other and just do what I can do each day.
Shit, just went and put a boot up their ass. Bank of America.
And that still doesn't help. Listening to The Story. And we've been following the story of Kirsten Alyanashad recently. Until this past summer, Kirsten was a flight attendant for a regional airline. And even though she she was working full-time. She wasn't making much more than minimum wage for the hours she says she worked. She even qualified for food stamps while she was on the job. Kirsten got so frustrated that she decided to give an anonymous interview to her local television station about the situation.
I told them I don't want my company's name to be mentioned. I just want the public to know that this is taking place.
Job of a flight attendant, often viewed as an ideal career for those looking for freedom to travel and a way to avoid the normal 9 to 5. One Valley woman who wanted to remain anonymous has worked on Compass Air.
It was just a real short segment, and they mentioned the company name.
Wait a second, they weren't supposed to mention the company name, right?
Right. Why else would I do an anonymous interview?
Well, it didn't take Compass long to figure out who'd been speaking to the television station, and Compass decided that Kirsten had violated a policy and let her go. And she'd already been on food stamps while working full-time, so things had been very hard for her. Kirsten's name was all over the media, and she was having a difficult time finding a new job until recently.
A couple of weeks ago, one of the smaller charter airlines that I've really been wanting to get on with emailed me, said they had positions open for flight attendants, and so I was invited to a face-to-face interview, so I flew to Little Rock. It was a risk because I had to pay for my plane ticket, but it was a risk I wanted to take. I don't know, I had a really good feeling about it, and they called me 2 days later and offered me a position. When the phone rang and I saw who it was, I was just, oh my gosh, it was like I won the lottery. Seriously, I was just, when she offered the job, I was just speechless. And she's like, well, that's how I was too, I remember. It's okay, and I was jumping up and down. My daughter was here, and she just, I don't know if she'd ever seen me like that before. And there were only 5 slots available. That's how small it is. It's a really small airline, so I couldn't believe it. It was astonishing. And everybody said that things happen for a reason, and I it's really hard to believe when you're really close to being homeless. But it must be true, and I'm just grateful. I'm just so grateful. It's a huge, huge blessing that I've been given.
Did you get on gas? Got on empty yet? Close. Not there.
Kirsten Ariana pitched training in December into Miami, and after 3 weeks there, her home base will be the city where she currently lives, Phoenix. Coming up next on the program, the story of a teenager who became mesmerized by blacksmithing at the tender age of 10. Not all of Derek Bliss's friends understand his fascination with the craft.
They're like, wow, that's cool, that's cool. What, are you making horseshoes? You making swords? That's usually what the response I get, but I say no, I only shoe horses when they get too close, and I don't make swords.
A young person's passion for blacksmithing and his assertion that this art is not dying. And you've got to listen, because he's the one holding the hammer on the red-hot steel. I'm Dick Gordon from American Public Media. This is The Story.
Make chastity belts, you said?
Partly cloudy skies with a slight chance of showers after midnight, lows in the lower 70s.